Now let's welcome for the day three. And in the day three, we will understand that how the client server request works and how the request from the user and how it goes to the Kubernetes server. So in continuation of the previous the day, as we learned about some basic of the Kubernetes, that how we can create a pod, how we can see the how we can describe the pod, and what are the how we can create the deployment, right? In continuous of the previous day session, let's do some more practical stuff. So, what we are going to do now today? So today we will cover that how we can run the how we can create the port through the command line, and also we will learn that how we can use the as a YAML for creating the port. So I'll just show you the basic structure of the YAML through which we can create the code. And in the coming days session, we will use this YAML format only in order to execute and in order to run the create the pods. So let's start with some basic stuff. Once it will done, after then we'll go to understand that how the client server request in the Kubernetes works, how the request is coming from the user, and how the kubectl and the kube API server that comes into the picture, and how the Kubernetes server fetches the image and creating the containers which are in the code, and how the Docker will come into the picture. So we'll all see these in the today session. So let's start. Let's start. Let me just start with some the create the ports. So first, which I told you that in order to check the ports, we can. So if I run this command, I can see that this is the same deployment that we created in the previous day session. So let's delete the same so that we can clean our the output. It's the same as we know the command kubectl delete all hyphen all. So once we run this command, all the ports and all the services and the deployment, that all will be deleted. So let's wait so that once it is deleted, then we'll try to create one port, and I'll also show you that how we can create the port using the YAML. So in order to do the same, let's create one port. So in order to create the port, I can use the command kube. Let's say I want to create one port with the name myOS1, and I can use the old image which I am using in the previous day session. That is the V. Let's here I type the name of the image and let me run it. So once I run it, let me see. Okay, now the port is created. In the detail of the port, I can run the kubectl get. So here you can see that one pod is created myOS1, and it is running in the running state. Now in order to see the description of the pod, as I told you that there is a command like kubectl describe pods myOS1. So let me just describe it. Okay, now the pod the complete description is coming. So here in the description, if you can see that it is giving in the event that successfully assigned default OS1 to minikube, then pulling image happened, then successfully pulled image, then created container my OS1, and then started container. This the describe command, it will also tell the container ID and image. So let me show you. So this is the container ID, and this is the image name. So in the and all these the codes, they are saved in some workspace, and the workspace like folder from which we can access the code. So let's create one of the code using the YAML code, and through which we can create one code. So in order to create the same, there are some basic ground rule for creating the code using the YAML. So the ground rules are that the entire code should be in proper indentation. Container should have multiple names and images. The name is specifically known as metadata. So specification, we use one keyword like specification, which is also inside the container, which has the container name and the image. And all the inputs will be in the inverted code. So let's write one YAML code. So in order to write the same, I can go in any of the paths in the your CMD prompt. So I have created one this folder, cube practice, and inside this I am creating one the port YAML format. So let's create with the port.yaml. Once I will using the Notepad command, so it will open the Notepad output. So in this Notepad output, you can write your code and can execute the same to create it, to create the code using the YAML. So for the same, let's write it. Let me show you the Notepad once. Once you will run the command Notepad, and it will open the Notepad. So let me show you that how it looks like, how we can write a code. So this is a Notepad. So inside the Notepad, if I write the command, that is the API version, the initial headline, need to define like the port, what kind of the sorry, what kind of the YAML code that I want to create, that is kind is port, and I need to define the metadata, and that I want to create, and after then I can define the simple YAML format code, which is having the proper indentation, and this is the generic ground rule that your indentation should be proper indentation should be there. So API version, it's the header that we need to use once writing the code. Then I need to define the kind, and that whether I am creating a pod or any service or any deployment. So I need to define kind, then metadata, but I need to define the name inside the metadata, then specification like containers inside the container. I need to give the name and the image name. And let's save it. So I have saved it, and let me just close it. And once I'll go back to the let me just go back to my CMD prompt. So here is the CMD prompt. So in case if I'll see here, so you will see here it as the file name is created like port.yaml, right? And in order to execute the same, so before that, let me just show you that what is the current ports. So here, if you will see here, you will see that there is only one port is running with the name of my OS1. Now I want to create, I want to execute this YAML code so that the another port can be created. There is a command kubectl apply -s port dot. So let execute this command, and I can see that the output is created successfully. Now, in order to check the kubectl get ports, let's see that the port name metadata that we have given, whether it is created, and I can see that the my port one, the metadata name that I given, and it is successfully created, and it is in the running state, and age is 11 seconds. So here in this way I can create the through the code using the YAML in the YAML format and using the proper indentation. So I can create the code. And in case if you want to see the description of this, so kubectl describe my code 1. So here as you can see above as well that once we were checking the describe, so I need to give the codes as well. Codes my code 1. So here you can see that it is scheduled and is pulled and then finally created container and then started. So here also you can see the container ID and image. So here is the container ID, that is the Docker, and then the image is there. Okay, so here we have successfully created the code. Now let's understand about the Kube server API, client server API, that how the request goes to the Kubernetes server and how it works. So create one generic slide. So in order to make you understand for better clarity, so let me just jump into it. Just give me a moment. So here, so today we will understand that how the Kubernetes client server request work and how it request goes to the Kubernetes server. So in order to move further, understand what is let's do the quick recall that we learned in the our previous day session. What is Kubernetes, Minikube, what is kubelet program. So Kubernetes is just a program. So program through which the client interact with the API server. So API server which is associated with the Kubernetes server. So API, the that is the application program interface that receive the request from the client. Minikube, Minikube is just a program which helps us to download image and deploy on Kubernetes. So Minikube is just managing the operating system where Kubernetes is there. Okay, so this is the Minikube which is just managing the OS, and the Kubernetes which is just a program and using the API receiving the request from the client. Okay, and if we talk about the kubelet program, so kubelet program which is used by the Kubernetes for communicating with the container engine. If we understand more about the kubelet, so kubelet is the primary node agent that runs on each node, right? It can register the node with the API server using one of the host name flag to override the host name. So in the Kubernetes architecture, if you understand, there are the two nodes, master node and the worker node. So kubelet, if we talk about the kubelet is a part of the worker node, and it is responsible for managing the pods and their containers. It deals with pod specification which defined in YAML and the JSON format. And kubelet takes the pod specification and checks whether the pods are running healthy or not. So it is a service which we can define as a responsible for conveying the information to and from the control plane API server. Control plane service, that is the API server. It interacts with the etcd, which we will understand in the coming session, which acts as a storage. To read the configuration details, it communicates with the master node to get commands and work efficiently. This is the kubelet, and what are the resources of the if we talk about the Kubernetes resources, what are the Kubernetes resources? So the Kubernetes resources like pod that we created, and if there are the multiple containers inside the pod, then it will called as a multi-container pod, and the replicas, deployment. So these are the resources. So if we move forward, and I have prepared this diagram to make you understand. So in order to understand the same, that this is the user using the kubectl utility. The request is fired by the user, which is acting as a client, and the request is going to the Kube API server. So Kube API server, which is associated with the Kubernetes server. So once the request is, for example, as I shown you that we have created one YAML code and executed using the kubectl utility, where we use the command kubectl apply -f and the pod.yaml. So the request goes to the client, and it goes to the request, goes to the Kube API server. And in the Kubernetes server, what it does, fetches the image, it fetches the image in the virtual box. And after then, using the container engine, it will create the one container inside the pod. So all the containers that are created, that will be created inside the pod. We use as a term for the Kubernetes, and where in the containers, where in the Docker, all the images are created. All the containers that are inside the pod, and we will create one pod, and inside the one pod we can have the multiple containers, and this is also known as the multi-container pod, when the pod inside the container. Now, in order to understand further that how the user request comes, so I created this diagram to show you, to make you understand that the user will send the request onto the Kubernetes server using the Kube API, and the image is fetched from the hub. Here, hub is the Docker hub, through which the image is downloaded, and then it creates the the Docker container using the container engine. So using the container engine, the container is simple flow. Just in order to make you understand that how the request coming from the client using the kubectl, which is using as a the pod YAML format, and then sending a request onto the Kube API, which is at the Kubernetes server, which fetching the image and then creating the image onto the container. So this is how it works. And if we move forward, so in the today session, we learned about that how we can create the pod. We can create the pod through YAML format, and how is the flow that takes place. That how the request coming onto the client and how it goes to the Kubernetes server, and what are the internal action, and that how what all the resources that comes into the picture, right? So this is in the today session that we learned about it. So in so just continue, in order to continue the session now, as we discuss the questions at last, that what we learned in the today session. So let's go to the question round. So if we talk about what is Kube API server, so after going through the session, I think that we can now answer this question very easily. That what is the Kube API server? So Kube API is basically a program which allows you to communicate or query to Kubernetes. Right? This is what we saw. This is what we saw here. Right? Kube API is what? Kube API is basically a program which allows you to communicate with the Kubernetes server. So Kube API server is a gateway. It is acting as a gateway to the Kubernetes cluster. Right. So here in the Kubernetes, we can create the cluster as well. So in the cluster where more than one server is there, that is acting as a cluster, master worker node. So it is a central, we can say the Kube API is a central touch point that is accessed by all the users and the components in the Kubernetes cluster. So it helps kubectl to talk to the Docker engine. Right, this is the Docker engine. So inside the behind the Kubernetes, there is a Docker is running. Right. This way we can understand that what is the Kube API and the API server. Now, if we move to the another question, that what are the ways to send request to the Kubernetes server? Now, there are two ways to send the request to the Kubernetes server, as I shown you, that one through the command that which we used, kubectl run, and then they given the port name and then the image name, right? And similarly with the code. So in the beginning of the session, I shown you that how we can create the YAML code. So this is the way to send a request to the Kubernetes server. Now let's go to the next question, that what is YAML language and how to write code in YAML language. Now I think that after going through with this today's session, you are familiar with the YAML language, and you are familiar also that how to write a code in the YAML. Okay. So now moving forward, that what is kubelet program. So as I told you that the kubelet program, so kubelet is the primary node agent that runs on each node. Okay. So what is Kubernetes resources? So the Kubernetes resources like pod, replicas, deployment, services. So these are the our resources that we are using. Now use the get and describe command. So as I shown you that how these commands are used. So the describe command through which you can check the container and the image detail. Now, what is the use of specification spec and the kind keyword? So, as I shown you in the today, the once I was preparing the code, YAML code. So I use the spec keyword where I use the image and image name and the container name, and the kind for which services for which the resource that I want to use for creating the Kubernetes, right? So hope the today's session is helpful for you to understand that how we can write a Kubernetes, how we can write the code in the YAML format for creating the pod, and also we learned about the various topics about the client server, that how the request is going from the client and coming to the Kubernetes server. So we approach to the end of the session. So hope you like the session. If you like the session, then please do give the like, and if you don't like the session, please dislike the session. And for the coming session, you will get the notification. So do subscribe my channel, so that you will get the notification for the same. So in the coming days, we will cover the rest of the part of the Kubernetes. So thanks all for joining the session. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye. See you tomorrow.